What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me is my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, here we are on the eve of, on the morning, I guess we could say, of the Paraguayan Apertura starting. It starts today. We have two games to kick off the 2026 Apertura, the last championship before the World Cup. We have two games with Recoleta against Sportivo Trinitense and Dos de Mayo against Sportivo Luqueño. So obviously, you guys, if you are interested in the Paraguayan League, as a lot of people are do listen to the show, be sure to check it out because obviously we have Cerro Porteño taking on Libertad, we have Olimpia taking on Guarani this weekend, so we have a lot of good games featuring big teams also to keep an eye out. But today we're going to be talking about transfers because I feel like that is sort of the big talking point of the last week or so, ever since we last recorded, is transfers because obviously we've had some deals be done. We had some rumors we talked about, deals also close to being done. So there's a lot that we can talk about. So I guess I'll go to you, Fede, first about, just how you feel rightly about these transfers and we'll talk about specifically some in a bit, but just like it's been, January is always the weird month, I guess, in the Paraguayan perspective of like, every day there's a new rumor. Every day a player gets linked to so and so club. I don't know if it's something that excites you or bores you, or I just want your thoughts on that. And I'll go to Ralph as well, just how you feel about the sort of like silly season sort of thing, at least in a January respect, especially as well, because we're used to it in Europe, we're used to it in MLS and other leagues in the world, but just specifically for you in Paraguay. How do you feel about it, Fede?
Well, first of all, hi to you, Roberto. Hi to Ralph. Hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. As always, here we are for our second episode of the year. We're still catching up, right, with all these transfers, with all these rumors that are still going around. It is that part of the year that, as a journalist, I'm totally used to it, to hearing rumors and never confirming stuff until I see it signed, I see it on paper, or at least until I see a presentation there of the players, like we saw yesterday with Cerro Porteño. They were one of the teams that probably had, one of the biggest press conference there with a whole bunch of players. They're probably the team that signed not only the best players, but made the most noise, right? I would even say in this transfer market that's been open, that will still be open a couple of weeks, right? We'll see if somebody else still wants to catch up, if somebody else wants to bring another big fish into the market, because as of right now, I do believe, and we talked about this on the first episode, it has been kind of settled, just blowing away in that sense, trying to take it to the next level after being champions last year. And then we have some late signings also here in the Paraguayan League to mention and to keep an eye out. Some teams are looking after they played their friendlies. Okay, what else do we still need? Do we need a couple of forwards? We need a couple of midfielders to try to put everything that they need together as for the whole season. And this apertura is going to begin with two big games, I would even say, this weekend, right? With Cerro Porteño playing Libertad, with Olimpia going up against Guarani, two clásicos, two derbies, also to put our mind strictly on the football and to start talking about these teams. But for this episode in particular, I do think we're going to talk about transfers, because it looks like the agents came out of vacations. They started working like crazy this week. And ladies first, right? I mean, congratulations to Claudia Martinez going to Washington Spirit. This is something we talked about last week also. I think that was probably the big news of the week. And then I would put on second place this Angel Romero too. Boca Juniors probably being the second big news that we also had this week. Those two big topics are definitely going to be something that we're going to talk about today.
Yes, absolutely. Before we get into any of these transfers, I'll go to Ralph and introduce you. But yeah, and then ask your feelings about that because yeah, it does feel weird. I mean, speaking from a Cerro Porteño perspective, the fact that they presented four transfers on the same day with Mosquera, Christian Paredes, Mateo Kimovic, and Pablo Vegetti. I think, you don't really see that often in these type of clubs anywhere in the world that you get four at once and do a presentation. But, it really does feel, and, it's funny that what Fede said that, yeah, you had all this month to sort of work out and do stuff for these agents doing stuff, and now here we are on mid-January, almost towards the end. And it's like, all right, everything's good now. It never changes. You can never get deals be like, all right, we're just gonna do this on the 1st of January, the first week, be done with. But no, they want to drag it as much as they can just to add more drama, I guess, to sagas and whatnot.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, everybody kind of watching, listening. It's partly the way that it's set up now in terms of the transfer system by having a window and a deadline. Everything like gravitates towards them because, of course, as an agent or maybe even a selling club, you're trying to wait for the biggest offer you can get, so you hold on until the end of the window and stuff moves to there. Whereas the signing clubs, of course, what they want to do is get the business done as quickly and cleanly as possible and give the manager more time to work with that player and the players more time to adapt. But about Cerro particularly, I mean, it was announcing four players, and it was really interesting. It's like almost a new spine of the side because you have Mosquera, the defender. Christian Paredes is a more defensive-minded midfielder. Then you have the more attacking players in Klirovic and Vegeti. And Vegeti, of course, is like the number nine they've been looking for, or they've been trying to fill this position, right? And so Amaria didn't work out last year. When Turin came back, it didn't really work. It's really since that first kind of Turin spell that Cerro's always been looking for this, and they even won the league despite right not having like one main goal scorer. So they've really improved or strengthened that whole spine of the side with these signings, and that's really putting them, I think, in the driving seat as we were talking about last week. And then well, you said you don't usually see people do four signings at once, but hey, check out like I think Nacional when they launched their kit, they had most of the players coming out that they signed or I think is it Rio New or it's San Lorenzo's probably got the record this season for the most signings. I think San Lorenzo's got 15 new players, so they got basically a new squad taking part. But I haven't seen them all line up at once, right, for a photo. That would be kind of cool.
It would be kind of cool, kind of that sort of thing that I think is a photographer's sort of dream in a way. But yeah, no, it's interesting to see all these transfers. Obviously, with social media as well, you always have debates and you always have people talking about transfers from a good perspective or a bad perspective as well. We'll talk about one of them in a bit in terms of like, kind of dividing opinion. But let's go first, like you said, Fede, ladies first, and it is going to be something special because we can now officially say that Claudia Martinez is going to the NWSL that had been rumored for quite some time, for, ever since basically her breakthrough year last year with the Copa America, going to the Ballon d'Or ceremony as being awarded one of the best young players in the world. And, everyone was thinking, all right, well, who's going to win the sweepstakes? Who's going to take her to, who's going to sign her? And ultimately, it will be the Washington Spirit that will sign her. The Washington Spirit will sign Claudia Martinez from Club Olimpia in a saga that kind of dragged itself as well. But ultimately, $950,000 will be the transfer fee that would put her up in amongst the top 10 most expensive players of all time. I'm just doing some checking here. It would actually make her seventh all time. So she would surpass Kira Walsh, who went from Barcelona to Chelsea for $884,000, who also was at one point the most expensive player in the world. But of course, that record has been smashed several times over. She would also be the second most expensive transfer in NWSL history. The only one that is bettered is Elizabeth Olave, who went from Tigres to Orlando Pride for over $1 million. But yeah, this is a big deal. It's a big deal for obviously for Paraguayan soccer. She's the first Paraguayan player ever to play in NWSL. I think that's certainly something that is special, irregardless of the prize and the team and where she's going. She's going to be playing on the team that just finished runners up in the NWSL. Obviously, they also are coming off the news of Trinity Rodman being the most expensive player in terms of salary, the highest paid women's soccer player in the world. She just resigned yesterday, so not a bad teammate to have in your locker room. Obviously, the Washington Spirit is also owned by one Michelle Kang, who owns obviously one of the best teams in the world in terms of women's soccer in Olympique Lyons. She's also investing in the London City Lionesses, who play in the Women's Super League in England. So yeah, I'll go to Ralph first on this one because he's kind of been, on the tabs of all of this. This is a really great historic move for Claudia, for Paraguayan football, I think even for NWSL as a whole, getting one of the most exciting young prospects in the world. And, it was a saga that kind of dragged itself on with, Olympia trying to negotiate a deal that would be around the what's it called? The release clause that would have been in the millions. It would have probably made her the most expensive player in the world. But eventually it got into the 950,000 range, which is obviously good money for Olympia, for Paraguayan football as a whole. And obviously, good for Claudia to take this first step into her next step into her next career move. especially coming off as well that the U.S. will play Paraguay in a friendly tomorrow, so it's a lot of eyes, a lot of American eyes will be seeing Claudia for the first time um, in an American soil, and it's going to be interesting to see how she does there. So I just want your thoughts overall on this whole deal, what you can tell, and yeah, just overall reaction to it.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, like you say, it's the historic move, and I think it's the one Paraguay's been waiting for a long time to have a player in the NWSL because this is something since Paraguay's been kind of trying to invest more in women's football and particularly development at youth level. They've done things like they've gone on tour to play college teams. They've tried to get the friendlies against US women's national team, which they've done before, right? Which I think they had two in last year in a series. And so there's really been like I think a focus towards there and a looking towards there with the hope that you would finally get a player in the NWSL. And then probably nobody expected it to be Claudia because she sort of burst onto the scene and being only 17 or even 16 when she first played the US when she was 16 in a tournament in Turkey. And so probably since then some people have been looking at her, and of course once she did so well in the Copa America and ended up top scorer, that I think really opened up all the kind of avenues and the opportunities. Um, like you say, she's going to a team that's really fighting up there, right? I think Washington Spirit they were runners up the last 2 years. They didn't actually win it, but they've runners up the last 2 years. They won the cup last year. And like you said, it's a huge organization because of Michelle Kang's ownership of Lyon. And so you're already kind of seeing there's a pathway into Europe, which could be the ultimate destination. But in terms of immediately, you get to, like you say, you get to play with Trinity Rodman, who they've just confirmed. I think it was like today or last night that she's staying. And so you're getting to play with some of the best players in the world. You'll be playing against some of the best players in the world in this league. And then I think maybe one of the key points that hasn't been talked about as much is the coach is Adrián González. So she actually has a Spanish coach. And I think that's very important for someone that she doesn't speak any English. She's very quiet actually off the pitch, Claudia. She's kind of, she's very relaxed, very chilled, but she probably needs some of that for the adaptation, right? Some of the home comfort. And Adrián González comes from Espanyol, where Dulce Quintana has played for years or played for years. And so don't underestimate that maybe there was some influence and knowing that Dulce Quintana had worked with him and maybe some talking and helping to get it over the line because I think maybe that was the big thing, right? She could pretty much have chosen where she wanted to go. So it was more, where do I go where I feel comfortable and able to do the best I can. And so now it's going to get very exciting because, like you say, we got the game tomorrow against the US, and then the season starts in March, and we'll start to see these games are broadcast, all over the world. There's suddenly the whole world will be able to watch Claudia like they weren't able to when she was scoring 8, 9 goals a game for Olympia in the cup or something that obviously went under the radar because it's not everyone can see it. So it's a huge moment, and it will open the way for other players. I mean, right now we don't have another player like Claudia. Not many countries do have a player like Claudia, but you're going to start seeing, I think, now more opportunities, and hopefully this kind of is almost a wake-up call to other clubs because Olympia have put in so much money into the women's team and they've invested really well in the youth. And so maybe some of the other teams will say, hey, it's worth sowing some seeds because look what we can get back from this. So is I think a positive all round, and excited to see what Claudia can do in America.
Yeah, this just takes me back to the Jessica Martinez days, right? When she was just starting out, and you were thinking, oh, we really got to take care of her. We really have to find the right path for her because we're not going to have a lot of players of that caliber, of that level. And look at Claudia now, right? It didn't take that long for another tremendous player to come around, and she's still so young. We're still going to see the best of her probably as she develops now in the USA, going from Claudia, as they call her lately, to that Claudinha that they try to put on her shoulders as she was getting popular to now this Claudia with that very American accent that she'll probably start hearing very soon. Even now, probably right in this friendly against the U.S., the opponents, her soon to be teammates will probably look at her differently as they're seeing that she's a player that's really breaking through, making a name for herself, and I think that's probably the next chapter for her, leaving the country as a champion, as a super champion. The young players were already looking up to her as a role model in every sense, and now she's gonna have to play alongside very good players, players that have already made it, and hopefully this can just spark something even more out of her. And I want to see her take it up even farther than this. I want to see her, competing in this team. I want to see her scoring goals like we've seen in Olympia, making an impact in every game possible in every opportunity that she gets. Hopefully that happens right away. But if it doesn't, it might take some time. It could take some adjustment. Moving away from Paraguay is not going to be easy. We see it in the men's game. We see it in the women's game. Hopefully she can make the best time out of this, and I think they found the right place for her. I mean, a team like this, the kind of players that they have, like Ralph was mentioning, like Roberto was introducing, also this team is getting ready for another season to try to fight for the title. So this can only be positive for her and her development. I'm so happy for Claudia, and hopefully we have a lot of highlights of Claudia this year to talk about, guys, in this show.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm just going into the U.S. squad that, I guess we'll talk about a little bit of the game that we're probably going to see tomorrow. Four teammates, sorry, five Spirit players will be on the U.S. squad. So obviously Claudia will get a chance to link it up with them. And one of them, of course, is obviously Trinity Rodman. And, looking at the squad, it's all NWSL, so it's not the strongest team that the U.S. can go in. And you look at Paraguay, obviously they're trying to kind of form an identity, with this, Nations League sort of format, and then trying to obviously compete to get ready to qualify for 2026. And certainly, Ralph, I guess I'll go to you. I mean, what do you expect from this game? I think obviously Paraguay come in as huge underdogs in this one, like anyone would do against the US. Obviously we have some players in there, like obviously Fatima Costa. You have Limpia Fretes, who was in that squad as well. You got some nice players that Barrios is going to work with. But I guess what do you expect from tomorrow, this game between the United States?
There's a big question mark around it, I think, because it's Herminio Barrios' first game in charge, right? Or real game in charge. And Fabio Fukumoto, who's been so involved with the Paraguay national team, he was for a time head coach, but he was also coordinating the youth teams. He's now left. He's totally out of the picture. So I'm not really sure, what in a way what we can expect and what we're going to see from this game. What we saw, I thought, what we were seeing in the Nations League was a team that they're trying to still find a way to play, but they haven't quite figured out what they're really trying to do is be able to not have too much possession and get the ball to Claudia quickly, because I mean, it's incredible like to watch Claudia Martinez and think she can basically burn any defender in the world, right? So they're thinking the more we can get teams to come onto us, the easier it is to kind of let her go. The only problem is defensively, I don't know if Paraguay is really strong enough to sustain all that pressure from, let's say, a US team, even if you say it's only a domestic based team. But I mean, if their tactic's going to be tomorrow, let's like try and sustain the US attacking us so we can pick them off on the break. That could go wrong very quickly, right? Because the US has the capabilities to score very quickly. And what we saw, it was a game they lost. I think they lost 5-0 or 5-1 to the US previously. What we saw in that game was from set pieces, Paraguay were just like totally they were unprepared in terms of from corners, from free kicks. Once the ball started to come into the box, they just weren't able to kind of match the US in the physical sense, and so they got overpowered there. So I don't know. It doesn't sound very positive from the way I'm describing this, but really, it's. I don't know. I'm just interested to see how Barrios tries to set it up. Like, what his game plan will be, and I guess the real question is, yeah, can Paraguay sustain the pressure that they're going to receive, and can they keep the score down? I'm not expecting them to win. That would be or even to tie. I mean, I think that would be a
Yeah,
miracle.
it would be historic to see that. Yeah, I don't think it will be like that, but at least show up a fight, against the best team in the world or one of the best teams in the world.
Yeah, obviously, and gain experience out of these games. Hopefully, for some of these young players, besides Claudia, they can show up in a game like this, make a difference in a couple of plays, and hey, and maybe catch some of these scouts' attention. Also, I do believe we have a lot of young players that are developing and will still look even better in a couple of years. But it is, I think, a great opportunity for the coach to get these players together to face a very tough challenge like it is to play against one of the best teams in the world and see what you can make out of this. And hopefully, in the next time they get together, this team looks a little bit stronger because what I've seen in the last games has not been pretty. That's why Fukumoto had to leave because not the results weren't coming with the games, but the team wasn't playing well, and it didn't look like everybody was on the same page. Just like Ralph said, the identity just wasn't there. The chemistry with the players either. So there was definitely a change to be made after what we saw in the qualifiers. And the pressure is on right now because we have really good players and we need to build a really good team. And I haven't seen that in these last couple of games. Hopefully, it is that kind of year for the new coach to start a new journey and for a really good team to start building in there in that locker room where Claudia Martinez is just gonna grow and grow because she's gonna have a new team. Players are gonna look at her differently, and she's gonna gain more and more confidence from her teammates also.
I just on this last thing as well. I know one of the other teams interested was, probably San Diego, but man, Ralph, I mean, talk about also a reality check of going to a cold climate like Washington. I mean, well, it gets hot during the summer as well, so she'll be used to that given to her Paraguayan roots. But going straight into the deep end in that weather, I don't know. I probably would have chosen San Diego on that end, but still, it's good to see her make that move to Washington.
Yeah, I mean, very, very glad that the NWSL starts in March, right? And not
Mhm.
in, and they don't play like the European seasons and go through the winter, or that would be horrific, I think. Because Audi Field's open, right? As far as I know. Yeah.
It is.
No,
Yep.
that would be that would be awful. But no, I think she's thankfully going in March, so it'll be a little bit milder, I suppose, as the season starts.
Totally. Absolutely. And, going into other transfers that we're going to see, obviously, we had some that happened also during the week. We had Ronaldo Martinez go from Platense to Talleres. Obviously, it seems like a route that a lot of Paraguayans are doing in the last couple of years. We saw that with Ramon Sosa. We saw that with Matias Galarza, who all left at their clubs as well. And now it's Ronaldo Martinez making it to Talleres, Fede. I want to go to you first. How do you feel about this move? Because, I think he did as much as he could at Platense. He won the Apertura last year, actually. So, you're getting a player that's also, scoring a lot of goals. He's one of the top goal scorers for that team. And now he gets a chance to play at Talleres, a much bigger club. Obviously a lot of expectation. It wasn't the best year for them last time round. So, obviously they need to improve on that. But getting a player of that hierarchy would be, it's good for him. And hey, it gives them more, it gives puts him on a bigger spotlight, I guess you could say, because certainly if he performs well and is scoring goals again like he did at Platense, then obviously that would help him get his chance to be on the World Cup squad for the summer.
Yeah, and he scored some beautiful bangers, right? I mean, you look at the goals he scored with Platense. I mean, obviously that's the way he made himself known and his way also to the national team. I mean, definitely one of the guys that had the biggest year in 2025. Hopefully he can keep up those numbers, right? Because he is a striker, he's a forward, he needs to keep on scoring. Hopefully he gets there and right away he can play, he can be a starter and be a star in this team, just like I saw lately in Platense, right? I mean, everybody respected him, and every time he was in that box, I mean, even the defenders were kind of scared of him because he was really on a hot streak. I want to see that again in Talleres because we need forwards that get hot and that can score as many goals as possible from here to half of the year till we play the World Cup. And no doubt about it, Ronaldo Martinez is one of the guys that's got me excited. He's going to a bigger club, and hopefully he can keep his numbers. I think As of right now, he's one of the latest ones to earn his spot in the national team, but I think he's been able to keep it in the friendlies, at least from what we've seen, right? And talking about friendlies, we almost got confirmation of apparently the two teams that we're going to face in March, and I do think Ronaldo Martinez is going to be again in that list.
Yeah, absolutely. It is rumored that, Paraguay will play their last two friendlies before the World Cup, well, at least the March ones, against Greece and against Morocco. I think that's it's interesting because, I wanted to talk about Ronaldo Martinez, we'll do that, but going into these friendlies, yeah, they get to play one team, Ralph, that is very similar to one of the European playoff teams that Paraguay could face in Turkey, Romania, Slovakia, or Kosovo. And another team in Morocco was a top 10 team in the world. They just finished runners up in the last AFCON at home, losing to Senegal. Obviously, we know that they finished in fourth place. Their U20 side just won the World Cup. Obviously, talented players alike. And I think, and of course, they play a South American team in the group stage as they play Brazil in the World Cup. So not only are these good friendlies for ourselves, but also good friendlies for them. And so, yeah, I think even for someone like Ronaldo Martinez, I think he's gonna take advantage of this type of move to, obviously showcase and say, hey, I'm here. I want to stay put. I want to do well, not only in these games with Talleres, but also in the friendlies against Greece and Morocco. He also hasn't scored yet. I think that's sort of un cuente pendiente, as we say in Spanish, something that he's willing to do and is eyeing to do. And of course, put that into the World Cup and get ready for it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think you just touched on the key point for Martinez, right? What he's done so well was scoring goals, right? With Platense, and he just hasn't been able to transfer that over to the national team. And the way he plays, his style is not quite the same as the typical striker that Alfaro is looking for, right? He's not much of a physical presence to hold up the ball. So the pressure is on to score for him to say, okay, I'm different to that style, but I'm showing the results. So I think that's definitely some, like you say, something he's eyeing to do, but I think there's some pressure on there. But I mean, it's the important thing is he got his move. He's continuing at the level he's been at, and that's what we don't really want to see. Too many players say, for example, dropping levels or coming back. I mean, I think we talked about this time last year when Gustavo Velasquez and Gatito Fernandez came back to Paraguay. There was that question about, will they be able to maintain their level? I think with Velasquez, we've seen he's been one of the best players, and still you're happy to have him in the squad. And then Gatito, we know there's all these question marks, but mostly because he hasn't been playing much, not because he's been playing badly. It's just he came back to Paraguay and ended up being on the bench for the end of last year. But we're seeing around, most people are maintaining, like you say, staying in Argentina if they're already there. We have a few that went to, well, very few that went on to Europe because you have Cantero that went to Russia. Um, and then the one person, well, should we talk about Romero? We should talk about Angel Romero has got into the Boca. So, I mean, he had a really nice send off from Corinthians recently, right? That recognized him as he's played the most games and scored the most goals as a non-Brazilian in Corinthians, which is an incredible achievement, which and sometimes goes a bit under the radar with Romero because there's always been so around both of them. There's always been so much off the pitch or other things going on. They're also very outspoken. Well, Angel particularly is very outspoken. So sometimes you just forget about the consistency and the level he showed at Corinthians for so long. I mean, that's very impressive in itself. It's very hard, I think, for foreign players to do that because you're a limited, you have limited amount of space for foreign players on a team. So if you're just at the level of a Brazilian player, it actually makes sense to play the Brazilian because you're not taking up that extra foreign spot. So the fact that he could do it for so long is actually very commendable. And now, I mean, Boca's it's a challenge in itself because of the size of the club. And I think already a lot of people are saying, he's not the right fit and they're question marks. So he's
Mhm.
going in. But I think he kind of thrives on that, to be honest. I think Romero's never had a problem with that. So I think let's see how he performs. But I wouldn't feel like just because there's some negative comments about it, that's gonna put him off. I mean, he really feeds off that, and he's proved it. Like we were just saying, he can score goals, he can make an impact wherever he's been. I guess the question mark now is on age. Has he still got it in the kind of tank? He's one of those players that came through very young, and so he's already had such a long career in terms of how many minutes he's played, how many games he's played, even though he's not at, say, the 37 years old of Vegeti, who hadn't actually played. I was looking, it's interesting, he didn't actually play that many games until he hit this really great run of form in the last 6, 7 years. So it's like since he turned 30, he's played many more games, but it's kind of because he was used more sparingly early on, whereas someone like Romero is the opposite. He's played so many minutes since a young age. So even now he's younger than 37. It's almost like he's at that age, if that makes sense, in terms of minutes under the belt. So let's see how he performs. But I have no doubts that he has the kind of mentality to make an impact.
It is never a dull day when it's talking about Angel Romero in Argentina. You know, Argentina, you know, the media and the fans, they always have to say whatever they want or whatever they please, and sometimes sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative. But with Angel Romero, you know, the fact that he's kind of getting all these criticism and he hasn't even kicked the ball yet for Boca, uh, you know, it makes it like Ralph said, you know, it even gives you even more sort of a reason to cheer him on and to him for him to do well there at such a historic club that is Boca Juniors.
I always want to be positive, right? When we get these kind of transfers, when you get a Paraguayan, a fellow Paraguayan going into a big club like Boca Juniors that attracts so much attention. But we do have a couple of examples lately, guys, in these kind of clubs that haven't gone very well, right? I mean, I remember Alan Barreiro lately in River. Now Matias Galarza losing his spot with with that play that he had, unfortunately, at the end of last year with River. He hasn't had a single minute yet this year in the friendlies, and now we see Angel Romero going to Boca Juniors, a place where his brother already played, Oscar, a couple years ago. And apparently everything came down to just a phone call between Riquelme, Oscar Romero, and he asked him, "Hey, what's your brother doing?" "Well, he's here practicing with me in Asunción. We're just getting ready to see who wants to take us." There's a couple of Brazilian teams that are asking for him, but they were here, guys. I mean, this we've seen this year by year, probably with the Romeros. Right? They start the year and they don't know where they're gonna play, and it happened again in 2026 as he was obviously closing the Corinthians chapter, the second version of that chapter, right? Because he went and came back to Corinthians for the second part of his journey. And lately, he wasn't playing that much. I mean, to be honest with you guys, I look at the numbers from last season, and he was more a sub than a starter, and he didn't score that many goals. And I'm hearing from Boca Juniors, they need a striker, they need a center forward, they got everybody injured. That's why they're looking for Angel Romero. Also, he has already done it in the Argentinian league. I think this is an advantage for him that he knows where he's going to play. He did it at San Lorenzo, and Boca's not just bringing a striker. Boca is bringing a player that's hungry, that wants to go back to the national team, that wants to make his spot in the World Cup some way, somehow. And the only way he's going to do that if he plays, if he scores, and if he can also be a leader, I would even expect in this Boca Juniors, because he's coming to Boca pretty much as an idol from Corinthians, and he needs to do just that in Boca Juniors because they do, I believe, need those kind of leaders. They're going to play Libertadores this year. They're going to have big games, and we're going to be following Angel Romero's journey because it's going to be a very fun one. And he's 33, guys. I think these probably are the last big challenges that he has ahead of his career.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it really is sort of the feeling of, you know, sort of a move like this. You know, obviously Antonio Sanabria had been linked to Boca Juniors as well, not really getting as much, not I wouldn't say playing time, but not really doing that well as he should at Cremonese, you know, and I think that is something that I think for a lot of these, I think this is a recurring topic. I mean, I guess we're talking from the striker's perspective because literally we started with Ronaldo Martinez, we started with Angel Romero, we started with now with Tony Sanabria. The striking position really, you know, even players that we don't know what's going to happen to them. Gabriel Avalos, you know, he had been rumored to possibly leave Independiente in Argentina. Nobody knows what's going to happen to him. And so, you know, Ralph, it really just kind of opens the door for anyone to be like, hey, if I'm a number nine, anyone can be, you know, and I'm sure for Alfaro, it probably is a headache, is that, you know, 5 months into before the World Cup. you don't know who your starting nine is. You don't know who your starting striker is. I think that, obviously we see players thriving in Europe, or those that are obviously getting consistency in their clubs, and players trying to get as moves as they want. We saw that with Richard Sanchez now leaving Racing to go to Olimpia. Who's to say that has to be done for the World Cup, that he wants to get this move? Adam Barreiro, if he goes to Olimpia, who's to say that these moves are not because, hey, I want to make that World Cup squad, because there are some players out there that are just not thriving or not doing as well consistently, and I want to take advantage of that. Like, hey, if I have a hot streak in the next month or so, because obviously the call-ups are in March for the final friendlies, I want to make that squad. And so we've always talked about this on the show, is like these moves that these make are in the transfer window are so important, because they are going to be not just from a career perspective. I mean, Roque Santa Cruz going to Nacional, we all know that it was just because, he just wants to keep playing. But like other players that we just mentioned, they want the best club possible to be on the best form possible and to make that Paraguay squad.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, everybody has that focus, and you've mentioned some names, and then you've also got Alex Arce, and you've got Isidro Pita, and so there's so many kind of strikers that none of them are like, what's the word, like none of them are a definite, but they're all around the same level. So it's almost who can have that run of form just in time that can kind of put themselves up there and or get themselves on the plane, right? As everybody always talks about. So there is a lot of that competition, I think, like you're talking about, as they try and get there. And I mean, the thing about not having a striker or not having a striker on form at the moment is it's going to put more pressure on the players around them. And so one in particular is Julio Enciso. But the fortunate thing, as we're talking about this, is Enciso is playing pretty much the best football I think he's played in Europe at the moment with Strasbourg. I mean, he's getting minutes, he's participating, he's making assists, he's scoring goals, and that I think is the more exciting thing. That while you might be worried about what's going on in terms of the striker position or the traditional strikers, you've got that support there. Oh, and Roberto tells us it's his 22nd birthday today as we're recording. So happy birthday, Julio. I'm sure you're listening. Um, but yeah, I mean, well, I hope he's listening because we're talking good things about him at the moment. But I think that's very exciting. I mean, you got Diego Gomez is playing regularly, and he's performing well. So you've got all the pieces around the striker are maybe enough to kind of fill in. A bit like what we saw with Cerro Porteño, right? That have never really had that striker scoring goals, but they managed to win the title because everybody else around them was kind of chipping in. So let's hope that continues in terms of the form of some of these key players, especially in CISO, and then maybe we don't need as much reliance on that number nine.
Yeah, and obviously, Fede, you're seeing the moves as well, or rumors of what's going to happen to players like Hugo Cuenca. He's not getting playing time at Genoa in Italy. Diego Leon, as much as he is trying to do as best as he can at Manchester United, maybe he wants to get continuous playing times. There've been rumors of him going to Nice. We saw Lucas Romero make the move to Universidad de Chile from Recoleta. We've been seeing a lot of these players make the moves that they need to get Gatito Fernandez possibly going to stay put at Cerro Porteño. Does that mean he's, going to play under Bava? We don't know what's going to happen to them. I think these are some of the storylines that we just need to keep an eye out. Ruben Lescano staying put at Fluminense, even though there was rumors of him going to Cerro Porteño and to back to Paraguay. It's just, a lot of these moves, a lot of these rumors, a lot of these that are circling it is World Cup related. It really is. Yes, you obviously want to do well for your team and obviously perform on a consistent level, but from a strictly Paraguayan perspective, these guys want to perform because they know that, like, hey, I can ball out, I could have a really good season, and I can impress Gustavo Alfaro, because as much as he also has his list of players, he also has to prepare for, whatever has to happen if there's injuries or there's bad run of form or something. It's I don't want to say it's frustrating, Fede, but it does give you that sort of, doubt and anxiety of like, man, we're 5 months before World Cup and we probably don't even know. I mean, I disagree. I think we do know who our best players are, but it's the case of finding the exact right players that we need for June.
Yeah, I'm sure Alfaro's already thinking about that also, right? About which missing pieces he still has, which players are still, he's not 100% with, and he's still gonna test them out. He has a couple of friendlies to do that in March. He's gonna have then to the opportunity to make up the list for the World Cup, but anything can happen along the way. We always talk about this. We've seen it in many World Cups before when an injury can change everything. We've even had a couple in these last couple of months where other places have opened up also in this team. And Alfaro is all over this because we saw him this week. I believe he was at Cerro Porteño's practice. Then he went also to see the Olympia players, and this is all during preseason, right? And he's already on top of everybody, on top of all the details. He's looking at all these things, and I think that any player that's under his radar that has been already called up is looking at his phone all the time, to see if they get a message from him or maybe even ask him directly, is this the right move for me? Do you want me to change teams? Do you want me to stay here? I think it is that kind of time where they need that communication and they need to be connected because we're very close to the World Cup. And I think we're going to be talking about the World Cup in every episode this year, Roberto. It's inevitable.
It is inevitable, and hopefully it's all the way up to July 17th. I think that's the day of the final, and that we go all the way there. But yeah, I guess to close it out, Fede, I guess what one transfer, obviously we saw the transfers done. We also have some rumors, but like, what is one that you're keeping your eye out for the rest of the month, and like to see them happen, for them to do well? What are you keeping your eye out on besides the ones that we've already talked about?
Well, I gave my candidate last week, which is what I need. They brought in a couple of Argentinians late minute, right? I believe. I'm looking at some of these names, but we'll see if they can actually make the difference. If they even begin the year playing, right? Because some of these signings are pretty much coming into the club, into the locker room the week that the tournament's starting. So you don't know how fit they really are, how ready they are to compete in this level. I want to see just how many of these late signings actually start playing in these first couple of weeks. But I'm definitely looking at the big names. I'm looking at Pachi Carrizo of Libertad because this is the only name they hired, and pretty much he's going to have to move the team around. He's going to be the creative side or the creative brain, I would even say, in that midfield. Even though he's still injured, he's not going to play these first couple of games. I don't know how Libertad's going to fit that midfield without him because I do think Chiqui Arce's plan has a lot to do with him. And then you look at Olympia. Richard Sanchez is a very interesting late signing. I don't know if he's going to eventually take over in the midfield where they have a lot of competition, but all eyes are going to be on how many goals is Pablo Begetti going to score. Is he going to be able to score as many goals as he did in Brazil? Is he really going to be the player that everybody expects him to be? Because I've seen a lot of players come into the Paraguayan league, with the whole sign with I'm going to score this many goals. I'm going to be the hero for my team. I'm going to be the star of this league. And then they just are not up to it, or they have problems along the way, or they're not comfortable here, or it's too hot, or whatever. I've seen it before, and I'm just going to say one name, Marcelo Moreno Martinez. He was the striker of the South American football. He was scoring everywhere around the world. And then he came to Paraguay and he got cold and he couldn't score, guys. I hope that Biggetti is not that player because Cerro fans are expecting for him to be the difference maker. From what I'm hearing, I mean, everybody's expecting for him to be one of the stars of this league. I don't know if he's going to be up to it, but we'll see. This Paraguayan football is very tricky. It's very hard for everybody. And I want to see if the big names can really be the ones that stand out this year.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. Ralph, what are you keeping your eye out for in terms of transfers, be it players or teams or anything for the rest of the month? What are you keeping your eye out on?
Yeah, I mean, I think Veheti is a big one for sure, but in terms of Cerro, what I'm really interested to see is Christian Paredes because he's
Mm.
one of those players that he was so solid in Portland. He gave them like 8 years, 200 games, and never really got called up to the national team or considered much. And then we saw Alan Sonora come last year that did not work for Cerro as they hoped, but coming from, had MLS experience and history. So now I'm really interested to see if the kind of the experience that Paredes brings back to Paraguay is something that can really make a difference and balance that midfield. Because for me, I think he's got a bit more than say Morel in terms of there's just a bit more to him. So I think he could form a really good partnership in there, and then that could become very important. Also looking at Libertadores, but I think if I had to pick one, I'm very interested to see what Paredes does, and then just a bit left field, but I saw that yesterday they confirmed the Copa Libertadores fixtures, right, for the preliminaries. Dos de Mayo get to play at home, which is very cool for them, you know, to take the teams up to the north, or well, for to take Alianza Lima right now up to the northern border, sorry. But I'm really interested that they signed Pedro Del Valle, who Del Valle in his moment when he was with Guaireña, I remember had some really important games, I think in Sudamericana. So now he has a chance to do something in Libertadores. So that's just a bit left field, but it could be cool, a name to watch out for in the Copa Libertadores.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I think for me, it's definitely gonna be Vigetti to see if he can repeat those goal scoring um, performances that he did at Vasco and do it at Cerro Porteño. I think that's exactly why they got him, not just for to compete in the Apertura, but also to do well in the Copa Libertadores. You know, obviously we'll have the draw very soon to see what their group will be. And yeah, you know, also on an international perspective, definitely Angel Romero. Can he live up to I wouldn't say the hype, but definitely silence a bit of the critics to get him on good form for Boca, for him to do well, and then hey, maybe get him get his World Cup spot secured. You know, it's going to be very interesting to see. So I'm excited. It's going to be a fun weekend for you guys to watch, and obviously any transfers that happen for the rest of the month, as we always will discuss here on Guarani Vision as we close out another great episode. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.